Hello, everyone, and welcome to this recording of Black Writers Read. My name is Nicole Young Martin, and I serve as a producer and host of this series. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 9 of season 4 of the series. So, quickly, I want to speak to folks who are near to Western Mass. I'll be hosting an in person Black Writers Read on Monday, March 4th to kick off Women's History Month. I'll be chatting with Janine Fondon about her forthcoming book, which was a culmination of a years long project and also included the exhibit Voices of Resilience, the intersection of women on the move, that was at Springfield Museums back in 2021. Janine is offering Black Writers Read supporters a sneak peek of her book as it's in the final stages before publication. Plan to join us at Holyoke Media on Monday, March 4th at 5 p.m. for this in person podcast recording. Black Writers Read showcases, celebrates, and honors the words, work, and traditions of Black writers from across the country, across genres, across experiences, and across the African diaspora. Black Writers Read is a behind the scenes conversation into the craft and what it means to create as a Black author in today's society. Since starting the series during the summer of 2020, we've hosted over 60 authors representing 10 plus genres from 4 countries and 15 states. Today, we welcome T.H. Moore. T.H. Moore is a Southwest Philadelphia native who relocated to Camden, New Jersey at the age of 10. He's an active member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated and earned a Bachelor of Science degree from Morgan State University. His career as an information technology consultant and real estate investor has afforded him the opportunity to travel to many countries all over the world, as well as most of the United States. Blending experience with imagination helped formulate the basis of and inspired him to write his first novel, The End Justifies the Means. His second novel, The Devil's Whisper, is uniquely creative fiction that ventures away from the inspiration of his own life experiences. In The Devil's Whisper, he dives into a darker set of dual protagonists whose sole objective is to survive the circumstances of the world they live in. In his third novel, I Am, T.H. Moore plays clairvoyant and without apology release the wrath of American citizens targeted by police brutality. In his latest work, titled Ghetto Bastard, a memoir, he takes an honest audit and chronicling of his life traumas and the decisions resulting from them and how they shaped his life, both good and bad. He shares how acknowledging his flawed behavior ultimately led to resolving them with the help of therapy. Now emotionally free and at peace, he shares his journey for the first time with readers. To learn more about TH and his work, please visit thmorenovels.com. That is THMOORENOVELS.com. When preparing for our conversation, I ask our guests, why do they write? Here's an excerpt from TH's response to the prompt. In this day and age, for me, being an author is a responsibility. We're seeing a cultural shift of instantaneous gratification and shortened attention spans, where if the content you're providing isn't a video with a lot of bells and whistles, you're easily overlooked. Writers and their use of literature as a tool have the responsibility of maintaining the integrity of detailed and purposeful transmission of knowledge and historical facts, even if it means sacrificing some level of entertainment. Concluding with, ultimately, our job is to disseminate information and knowledge. I booked TH some time ago and am very excited to have had a chance to finally chat with him about his work. Thank you so much for tuning in for our recent conversation with TH Moore. I'd now like to turn it over to myself at a different time, as this is a recording, and TH as we take on the virtual stage. Thank you so much. So, I'd like to start off today's conversation by asking, what is the origin story of your forthcoming book, Ghetto Bastard? I'd love to know the story behind the title and also why this book right now.
Well, first, thank you for having me on, especially during Black History Month. I appreciate it. Love you for that. But to answer your question, I had basically, like over the past few years since releasing I Am, I kind of had like an epiphany that, it, it let me know that I was stuck in an emotional rut. And what I mean by that, like I was finding it hard to make emotional connections with people who weren't already in my immediate circle, like my family, my lifelong friends, a select few of, past significant others. So this will be a revelation to a lot of people. I went to go see my therapist. So I've had people in my past ask me, "Have you ever been to therapy?" And I kind of like, "Nah," and like I'll joke around and say, "No, I don't need that." But the truth is, I've had 2 therapists in my lifetime. So I was noticing this rut, and I went to go see my therapist, and she told me to journal. And I was just like, all right, fine. I've read a couple of books. I'll journal. And that literally sparked like this type of, awakening for me. So originally when I was writing the book, well, when I started writing the journal, it basically turned into a book for me. And I originally called it Survivor's Remorse. But after completing, the writing of the journal, starting off as a journal and then eventually turning into a manuscript as a memoir, um, I didn't feel it was like an appropriate title anymore. So once I reread the book, doing like my own personal edits, before I would send it off to like my real editors, I was seeing a reoccurring theme of me focusing on like my past experiences and like my life's traumas. So that's when I switched it to Ghetto Bastard because again, like you mentioned in the intro, originally I was born in Southwest Philadelphia. I moved to Camden, New Jersey with my mother when I was about 10 years old. So I've grown up majority of my lifetime before going off to college in ghettos. And I have a strained relationship with my father, and he and my mother wasn't married when I was born, which technically, well, not technically, it makes me, based off the Webster Dictionary, a bastard. So it just came to me. I said, I'm going to name the book Ghetto Bastard. So that's how that title came along. And that's what inspired me to write Ghetto Bastard.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for a couple of things that you offered in your response. One, that you're Black and you a man and you go to therapy. Thank you. Two, the title, because one of the things I'm also realizing now with a lot of works, especially in like communities of color and marginalized communities, we're taking back literature, we're taking back words that were once deemed inappropriate, once deemed,
Got it.
yeah, and I think that's why I was most excited about the title. I was like, yes, he's taking a risk by reclaiming this word.
And if I could touch on that, like you got it exactly because I wanted to. I know when people saw it, it was going to be like a shock factor, number one, but also it has such a negative connotation to it. But I wanted to, just like you pointed out, kind of redefine the word because even though I am, literally a ghetto bastard, I'm my life and my life experiences haven't been in totality negative. In the grand scheme of things, people say you had a pretty good life, and I would agree with them. But I still am a ghetto bastard. So that's you caught the little hidden message that I wanted with the title.
Yay. So Ghetto Bastard is a departure from some of your earlier work, which was written in suspense fiction. Can you share with us why specifically suspense fiction as the vehicle that carried your earlier work, and then offer some insights on the particulars of the genre?
That's well, selecting suspense was pretty easy for me because, and what I mean by that is that I'm my mother's only child. So even though my father had 2 other children where I have sisters or half sisters, I'm not sure how it works, but I was raised an only child, so I have an active imagination. So when people babysat me, they knew if they put me in front of a television, I wouldn't move for hours. So I've watched every television show. I've watched every genre of movies and cinema, musicals, foreign films. So for me, it was just something that naturally came with my active imagination, and probably my ADD. My ADD probably has something to do with it too. But when I write, I can literally see the stories in my head, and it reminds me of like when I hear interviews of musicians like Pharrell and Kanye West say that when they develop music, they can see music. I can see the stories. I can see the people. I can see the clothes that they have on. I can hear their different voices, the type of vernacular that they use. So fortunately for me, I learned how to type when I was in high school. So I literally close my eyes and I just type what I see in my head. And when I'm done with the scene, that's when I'm finished typing. So for me, going into suspense fiction it just made sense to me. The stretch was going into this new book, Ghetto Bastard, where I'm writing a memoir and I'm writing it in first person because all my previous books are always written in third person.
Oh, wow. And that was actually, and that's the question that one of my viewers who wasn't able to join today, she emailed me earlier and asked if I could insert it. So we talked a little about that. I'll insert it after this next question.
Okay.
One thing I also want to point out, TH. So before I have my guest on, I do a ton of research. I watch previous interviews of folks. I do a lot of digging. And one of the things that I noticed in a lot of your interviews is that you are very well read and read versed in a lot of movies, television. I was like, I'm about to have a nerd on. This is awesome. And I hope it's okay to like give you
Oh,
that title.
I mean, I work in tech, so like I fell in love with people when I was like 6 years old. So I know who I am. I'm a nerd. I'm a geek. But fortunately, I'm like 6'3" and naturally athletic. So I have like a wide range of people who are amongst my circle. So I hung out with the nerds. I'm not into like anime or I don't even know how to pronounce it correctly. I'm not into like that or like Star Trek, but Matrix, computers, tech. Yeah, I love it. That's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you for that because I'm also like nerd is a very broad because me, I wear, my nerd badge proudly, but I'm not like my brother, he's in anime. I don't understand it. I'm into like the Avengers. I read a lot. Like you should see the shelves of books that I have. And also too, I'm into like documentaries and all those other things. And I have 4 degrees. So I'm just like,
Okay, well, one after undergrad, I was like, I'm done. I'm not sitting in any more class. I can't do it.
whereas me, it's like I knew I wanted to get my doctorate from a very young age. And I'm like, I finally did it. I finished in October and now I'm like, damn,
What do
I
I
don't
do?
have anything else to do. Thank you. I'm like, I don't have anything else to do now. And then also lastly, the other thing I want to talk about too, and thank you for inserting that because I was like, I had a feeling that you and I had another affinity in common besides being from, growing up in very Black spaces. You
Mm,
grew up an only child. I grew up an only child until I was 15.
see?
And people don't realize like how creative you have to be to not be bored. I had a lot of like invisible friends. I
Part.
right.
But
I,
popped in the
I
back of my head by my teachers very often because, like, I want to tell you a quick story. I'm sorry.
no
So,
go ahead. Yeah.
give a shout out to Miss Barnes. She was my second and fourth grade teacher at St. Rosalima in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She's in the middle of class, and I'm paying attention, but the ADD kicks in, and like my pencil is in my hand, and then literally in the middle of class, I'm going like this because now I'm imagining I'm flying in an airplane, and I don't see anything in class anymore. And then she just walks up to me, still oblivious, and she just plucks me in the back of my head. She's like, "Pay attention." And I'm like, "Oh, sorry, Miss Barnes." But like, yeah, I would just zone out sometimes. I have to make a conscious effort not to do it now as an adult. But that's like how my imagination works.
Yeah, and I was an only child for a long time, and it's like, and also too, I was the only kid in the room in a lot of circumstances. I was fortunate to have parents who wasn't that whole, even though I grew up in a very Black situation, they weren't those who were like, kids are meant to be seen and not heard. I was always a part of adult conversations. So like my creativity comes from a lot of those spaces, and then also too spending a lot of time alone. So
Right.
I was like, I knew we had another affinity in common.
Yep. So, being just me and my mother, yeah, like, she didn't neglect me, but I had to spend a lot of time and had to learn how to take care of myself earlier than I should have. But as a result of that, imagination, I discovered a love for reading and for cinema. And whenever, other people had to babysit me, they was like, Terry's a great kid. I just put him in front of the TV and he's fine. I'm just like, yeah, I stay out of trouble. And it's easy money for you. So, I mean, it worked out for everybody.
Yes. So each of your earlier books, and me as a writer, I'm really intrigued by this. So each of your earlier books feature two protagonists, which I'm not going to lie. Writing one protagonist is hard, so writing two has to be even more so. So this is a very specific style choice. I would love to know, why did you make this specific choice for your first three books? And then can you go into a little bit, because I want people to read the book, to go into what can we expect of the protagonist, the singular protagonist journey in your memoir, Ghetto Bastard.
Okay. So Revelation. So when I first started reading, I read like all of Omar Tyree's books. Shout out to my writing mentor, Omar Tyree from Philly. Um, and then I transitioned to like Eric Jerome Dickey, and there was a book by Eric Jerome Dickey called Chasing Destiny, and that was the first book that I read where it had two characters, and he would dedicate like 3 chapters to Destiny and then 3 chapters to the other main character, who I can't remember now because it was so long ago. But that was the first time I saw that. And I was just like, yo, that's cool, because you have multiple storylines to follow. So I will admit that I stole that from Eric Jerome Dickey, because all of my books up until the one that comes out in July, Ghetto Bastard, they have two main characters for the same reasons. I want to give my readers multiple storylines to follow, so that way I can bombard you with action and twists and turns to keep you engaged and create that, quote unquote page turner. Now, I'm gonna need you to remind me what the second part of the question was.
Yes, I'm an academic. I always have long ass questions. What can we expect of the protagonist's journey in Ghetto Bastard?
Oh, okay. Um, Completely different. Like, obviously, because the genre is different. This one is nonfiction, and it's written in the style of a memoir. It's basically, first off, it's a chronicling and an accounting of my life's traumas and how those experiences developed me into who I am today. And secondly, it's an honest audit of those life's experiences, and me, again, working with therapy and my therapist, um, taking accountability for the choices that I've made, the good ones, but most importantly, the bad ones, and seeing how those bad choices, like I touched on in the beginning, how I realized I was in like an emotional rut. I could literally correlate those choices that I made in life and how they developed me into an adult, and how those choices also contributed to my emotional dysfunction, for lack of a better term. So
Mm.
the difference between my previous work and now, like, this is Ghetto Bastard is my personal story that I've ever written. I had to, let a lot of people in onto some things that happened that people probably don't even know, that who are my closest friends. It's not anything like, I killed someone or something like that. So don't anybody worry, it's not like that. But it's mostly about me and my experiences and how those experiences shape me into who I am.
Mm. I'm actually going to save, because I was going to insert the question that we got prior. I'm going to save it. And for those folks who are joining us in the beginning, I talked about this, but there was a glitch, so you missed it. If you do have a question for TH, please feel free to include it in the comments section of your particular platform that you're joining us from today. So, growing up and thinking within the memoir genre, what was your most formative moment in your life, and how does it appear in your book? How do you honor this moment, and what would you like readers to take away from how it is represented in the book?
Okay. I'm gonna cheat a little bit. And what I mean by that is that I'm not gonna give you my most traumatic, because that's literally the first chapter of the book, and I don't want to ruin it for people. And it's pretty powerful for us. So I want them to experience it the first time that they read it when it releases in July. But I can give you this one. And I touch on these my answer also in the book. There have been 3 separate occasions where I've almost died in my lifetime. So I go into those instances, and how they came about, how I survived, and I honor it. To answer your question, like I honor by describing each event in detail, and those, again, like those experiences contributing to how it helps shape my personality. And to help give you like an idea, what I mean by that is that like the people who are pretty close to me, they know that I'm relatively pretty fearless. I have like one phobia that I'm not going to share with people because it's the phobia and I don't want to expose like an extreme weakness. But for the most part, I'm I'm that's the best way I can describe it, that I'm fearless. I'll try a lot of things that typically I would say a standard person might not try. My mother, she prefers to call it being reckless, especially by the way that I drive. Like she hates driving the car with me. She do it, but like she does not look forward to it is the best way I could describe it. But for me, yeah, like those three separate occurrences kind of like developed an armor on me where with each brush with death and me, coming face to face with the Reaper saying, hey, you're a little bit tougher. I mean, and again, that might come across as toxic masculinity in these, day and age of pop culture buzzwords, but it hardened me. But that's the best way I can answer that question. But that was a good question. I wasn't expecting that one.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning toxic masculinity, because also too, I think the thing that folks forget when it comes to like gender rules and things like that, people also forget that there's like centuries of, especially I'll speak for the black, because that's the only thing I can speak to, the African American experience, and me as someone who is from like generations of like, I'm so American, I'm from like generations of slavery, like we traced it. And
Same here. Same here.
yeah, and people keep forgetting, and this is why I want people to problematize toxic masculinity. It's not, I feel like it's not that it's toxic, it's that let's honor the things that people had to do to figure out their shit and also figure out survival. Because I had this conversation the other day with my students. My students will, I'll quickly say this. So we're reading Their Eyes Are Watching God. And many of my students take issue with Tea Cake. And Tea Cake, he's supposed to be the romantic interest for folks who haven't read it yet. Amazing book by Zora Neale Hurston. It was published in 1937. And my students were talking a lot about the recklessness and like how he would disappear on Janie, who's like the main character, for days, and his hustle and things like that. And I had to keep reminding students, I'm like, he is maybe second or third generation removed from slavery. Let's talk about let's, instead of saying like how horrible he is as a man, let's talk about what he's doing to survive, because our people weren't given anything when they were freed.
Right.
So
And I'm glad you brought that up because I actually addressed that in the book in Ghetto Bastard, because there's a section where I talk about like where you're describing, I was like, it's a learned behavior.
yeah,
And once you learn it, and if you purposely or subconsciously um, integrate that with your culture or what you do or your traditions, then that becomes a part of you. That becomes a part of what you teach your children. It becomes a part of what they teach their children, your grandchildren. So there's some learned behaviors that we have out of the struggle of being here in America that we've adopted unknowingly, just as like we've adopted soul food knowingly. We embrace and we love soul food, but there's certain behaviors and traditions that we also have that we've adopted because that's all we've known. And that's when people start talking about toxic masculinity, like I get where they're coming from, but like when they try to lay an entire blanket across men in this country, then that's the part that I have an issue with. You have to, I call it being lazy, intellectually lazy. You have to understand or ask or be curious enough to be like, well, why is he doing these things? And once you have those conversations, and again, when I started journaling and going through these sessions with my therapist, I was like, oh, so that's why I do that. Oh, that's where that comes from. So again, it's like it's part of you not just saying, "Ooh, that's toxic masculinity, got you," Like, well, why does he does that? Why does he do that? Why does she do that? And you'll be surprised at the answers that you find when you looked at the root of what our behaviors are.
Yeah. And that takes me back to you and your driving. And I can only say this because I recently visited Baltimore for the first time, because you're now based in Baltimore. When you said that you drive, like your mom says you drive reckless, you are driving the way that people drive. Like I was like, and I live in Connecticut and work in Massachusetts, and people here drive crazy as well. But it's just something even more unique about the driving in Baltimore. So don't even think about it as you, as your mom say, drive recklessly. You're driving to keep up with other people that you're driving around. And so that's the thing that I want, people to really understand, is that people and the way in which they behave, there's a it's just not, oh, we're doing this just cause. No.
No, I'm a Jersey driver. Like, that's where I learned how to drive. When I when I came south, they drive me crazy. I'm just like, okay, it starts raining. Everyone drives 10 miles below the speed limit. I'm just like, it's just water, people. The tires are made of rubber. We'll be okay. And forget about it snowing. They just shut everything down. I'm just like, come on. So, like, unless my car is fishtailing, then no, I'm gonna go as fast as I can manage my car. But again, uh, I'm probably not the best person to take advice from, because, like, I typically drive faster than normal people. If the police are watching, I'm lying. I'm not being serious. Don't start pulling me over, please.
Yeah, be like but again, he's driving to keep up because, like,
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie.
traffic, that's what I call it. I'm going with the flow of traffic.
Exactly. So so I'm backing you up there because I'm, like I said, I went and I was there on a game day. I was there, and I was also near and I was like near the Raven Stadium, and I was like, wow, people drive crazy. And I'm like, oh wait, they're keeping up with the. So I just want to say, you're not driving reckless. You're keeping up with traffic. So when did you discover so we're now going to move into talking more about you as a writer and your specific craft. So when did you discover your gift for writing, and how do you keep your craft sharpened? And then how do you want your voice to contribute to the larger literary canon? So again, another three-part question.
All right. I'm going to let you know. You're going to have to remind me of the last one, but I'm going to answer everything I remember so far. To, Honestly, I stumbled into writing. Like, I fell ass backwards into it. Quick story. When I started IT consulting, my first project, my company sent me to England for 10 months. I didn't even have a passport. They was just like, well, go get one. You got to be there next week. So got a passport expedited, flew over to England. I didn't even know where I was at in England. I couldn't pick it out on the map, but that's not the question you asked. So I went there the first 5 months. It was like summertime, so I was traveling. I was going to Amsterdam. I was going to other countries like Stockholm and Sweden, enjoying myself. But then European winter hit, and then it's extremely cold. So at that point, I basically like stayed indoors, hunkered down, and I was getting bored. Coincidentally, um, if you guys remember the Blade trilogy by Wesley Snipes, Blade 3 came out while I was in England during that winter. So I was so happy to see how the third installment was going to wrap up the trilogy, that Saturday morning that it released, I mean, that Saturday afternoon, I was there at the first showing, and the movie was trash. It was so bad that I walked out of it in the middle of it, and so angry walking down the street back to my flat. I was just like, I could have written a better story than that. And then that's when the light bulb went off. So I would say like a year and a half later from that next morning, me starting to write the first word of my original manuscript, getting it edited, cover artwork done, and actually having that first proof in my hand. It was for selfish reasons. It was sparked by that movie, and I also wanted to leave something behind. It was like a bucket list type thing. I always knew I wanted to write a book, to leave something behind, to say to the world, hey, I was here, I existed. But that movie is actually what sparked it. Like with Bucket List, I thought it was going to be something later on in age. So But even when I published it, I really didn't take it that seriously. I didn't promote it. I just told my family and friends, I was like, hey, I wrote a book, go read it. I didn't have a website. It was like I was just basically word of mouth. But then a friend of mine, she basically, we were having a conversation and she was like, you need to take this writing thing more seriously. It's more than a hobby. And that was the first time someone had taken the time to like, hey, dummy, like snap out of it. Like you have something here, like use it. You're wasting your talent. And she's like one of the few people that I actually listen to and take advice from, and they've never been wrong. So I actually give her a shout out a couple times in the book. But that's how I didn't stop after the End Justifies the Means. And then after that came The Devil's Whisper and I Am, and now Ghetto Bastard. What was the last part of your question?
What do you yeah, and thanks for doing that. Because I'm like, I need to learn how to truncate my questions better.
No,
Uh, what would
no,
you
I can't focus sometimes. It's not true.
No, but you're also not the only guest that has been like, wait, how many questions you got in one question?
Okay, so it is you. I'm just playing.
Yeah, it is me. How would you like for your voice to contribute to the larger literary canon?
Um, that's a good question. Um, for me, like literature is always going to be like that first method of us teaching, disseminating information, and educating people. Um, I look at it as like books as being our source of truth, where how we can chronologize, or how we can chronicle history. Like I'm a big fan of history. Like majority of the movies that I watch are stories that are based off of actual events. I'm drawn to them, and and that's another reason why in my books I leave little breadcrumbs and little tidbits of me giving history lessons, or we talked about it early, why we do certain things as far as like our traditions and our habits. And I'll dive into, oh well, we do this because back in the day it's originated because of this learned behavior, and now it's manifested itself into this tradition that we have now, like talking about soul food. Like my family is from the South, from like Little Mountain, South Carolina, where as a 4-year old I literally saw my grandfather shoot a pig in the head, drag it out the pig pen, and like the ladies in my family hung it upside down, gutted it, and prepared the food. So I know exactly where pork chops come from, bacon comes from, chitlins come from, and like that's also a reason why I stopped eating pork too. But I come from that tradition where I can see where our soul food was developed, because that's what we had. Those were the scraps. We didn't eat unless we took these pig intestines, squeezed all the shit out of it, cleaned it, and then smothered it with seasoning like hot sauce to make it digestible. So I want my books to be number one entertaining. Again, that's why I have the two characters, but I also want to educate where I can without it seeming like I'm preaching to you or you're sitting in a classroom. So I sneak in little lessons here and there to the best of my ability.
Nice. And thank you for referencing, which I'm gonna email you to get that quote about like books are our truths. And this is something that, especially now, Black History Month, and the fact that many of the books that represent our experiences and our people are ending up on banned books list, and the stuff I hear about Moms for Liberty and all sorts of shit across the country.
Right.
Like this is why for me reading is so important and why I stress it, and I think this is why I became an educator. Literature just not only opens up so many minds, but it's archival. It is archival. And when folks take away these books, people don't have access to their history and to their cultures to understand why they're here and how they're here. Just in like 2 semesters, because I teach for a non-traditional college program where a lot of my students get their high set and their GED, and they were young mothers. So I teach I teach the populations that higher education tends to forget. And in one semester, I had like 40 and 50-year-old students who had access to like their eyes were watching God and other text and know about negative stereotypes about our community and know a lot about our history. The semester I'm in now, many of my students are in their early 20s. They're fresh out of high school or getting their GED. And many of them are Black, which is also rare because in Western Mass, a good chunk of the people of color population is Spanish speaking communities
Okay.
and and Hispanic and their Latinx. So when we were having a conversation about some of the stereotypes about Black women that were coming up and Their Eyes Were Watching God, and mind you, Their Eyes Were Watching God is a banned book that used to be read in high schools, and many high schools now don't read it. So that's another reason why I teach it. Many of my students didn't even know about these negative stereotypes. And I'm like, and one of them even said, somebody called me one of these things the other day. And I'm just like, just thinking about the disempowerment that is happening
Mm-hmm.
in education when people are taking away access purposefully. I'm like,
You're gonna make me go on one of my rants, but
no, please go, rant now.
all right. I need to take a breath like my therapist advises me to do. But I agree with you because, like, I've said to people, and I've even posted it on Instagram, that history is the cliff notes for the lessons that we're facing today. And what I mean by that is like one of the things that I appreciate about literature is, like I said before, is one of our one remaining sources of truth. And especially like in this world of people trying to convert opinion into truth and American culture shifting into this place of like hypersensitivity. So we're basically we basically become a culture that we're so afraid to offend people over being canceled that we're shy away from basically being truth tellers, and that's extremely dangerous. And it's like almost like we're rejecting intellectualism. And like if I'm like gonna be really honest, and my therapist is gonna have to forgive me for me talking that way, we have too many stupid people wielding power in this country.
I.e. your shirt.
Yes. And just in case people are watching, they just seeing the white in Trump, it says anti-Trump as fuck. So don't people start thinking that I'm a Trump supporter, because I'm not. I hate the bastard, and we need to make sure that he doesn't get elected again. But I digress. I'm not going to turn this into a political conversation. There are too many stupid people who are in charge. And this country, for all its flaws, one thing that you can give the founding fathers, that they were very educated. They were masters of English language. And you had to be, because we didn't have the internet. The only way we communicated was through conversation and with letters. And if you weren't able to articulate your point properly and send a letter that you're probably not going to get a response from for like a month later, if you use the wrong tense or you use the wrong type of word or an adjective, that's the difference between telling someone, hey, we're good, we're at peace, or I don't like you, we're at war. And that's why communication is so important. That's why I think literature is so important. That's why I think mastering the art of communication through conversation that we've lost with social media, and also articulating your thoughts and your messages in writing, are so important. So them banning books is purposeful because they want us to be stupid. The people who are in power want us to be undereducated, not well read, so that they can control us. And I'm going to stop it right there before people think I'm a conspiracy theorist. But the truth is the truth.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for going on that rant, because that is the one thing, not to make this political, because I will easily go there. Like, that's the one thing that is just really upsetting me right now about people in power. And I always have a conversation with my students. I'm like, because also, too, that's the other thing that's happening. Not only is intellectualism and access to literature going away, but I don't know where this conversation comes up, especially in a lot of urban spaces where people are like, don't vote, don't vote, don't vote, don't vote. And I had a conversation. Many of my students, and there were two really big elections locally in our region. And it came up because we were reading a book about about like the in the 1960s and like blacks being withheld from voting and students were like, "Oh, we thought the playwright, this was a great, great fiction." No, this happened. And then we get into the conversation about like how many of my students for generations people don't vote in their families and they're also being told by people in their families not to vote. And I'm like,
Oh, what it does.
right. So I'm
It-
just like, "Oh yeah, go ahead."
no, I'm just agreeing with, like, it pisses me off. It enrages me, and that's why I call them stupid. It's I'm
Yeah.
or outside of that. I mean, it's just, it has to be one of the dumbest things that we say. Like, our people died for a reason. They weren't bored sitting at home like, oh, let me go do voting and die and get strung up by it because, yeah, it's not that important. It's literally how they control you. And like, I get it. Like, we have limited options. It's a two-party system, blah, blah, blah. But sitting at home isn't the smart thing to do. Is you're basically surrendering. Because if you want to look at it, you want to flip the script. The moment anyone in power says, hey, black people, we're not even going to allow you to vote anymore, everyone would be up in arms. But on the flip side, there will be the same people who are saying, oh, my vote doesn't count. Oh, I don't vote. You sound stupid. And that's just a fact. And people have to stop being so nice to say, stop saying that. You sound stupid.
Yeah, and that's the thing that, people that there is a corollary between voting and literature. And these are like the two things that I'm extremely passionate about. For those, they may have heard the train. I live like two houses from the train tracks. Um
It's okay.
yes. And like this is one of the reasons like why I took John Lewis's death really hard a couple of years ago. And then also now we're at this precipice about taking away literature and also slowly voting rights. I'm like, these two things
Exactly.
give us so much power and so much agency. And I tell my students, I'm like, okay, your skin tone, and we're having a conversation about literature and voting, and and I leave it at that. So this is why these things are not only so important to me, but I always find a way to bring the two conversations together. And I'm glad that we were able to do that today about literature and voting, because I do think there's a corollary, and and both are happening right now where people are trying to strip us of those two things.
Yeah, and never mind. I was about to make the conversation go on longer. No, we're good.
Oh,
I'm not,
I mean, we can, but I'll go back to the reason for the
we can have that one-on-one, but like, yeah, we're not going to torture the listeners.
yes. Yes, and so going back to the read, be like the reason why we here. Hopefully, copyright won't get me for that. Your body of work covers some very heavy themes. And I'm like, this is a great transition. Your body of work covers some very heavy themes that are relevant yet traumatic to the African American experience, like police brutality and racial relations. Why is it important for you as an African American man to craft these experiences in literary traditions, especially with memoir, as there is now? We talked a little bit about this before coming on air. Especially with memoir, as there is now a surge of Black men writing in this genre. For me, it seems that these experiences have been underrepresented in the memoir genre. I'll say, I don't think I'm going to do the last part of the question, but essentially, the question I'm asking is, why is it important to you as an African American man to write? And then talk a little bit about how you're feeling about contributing a memoir at this time where it seems like there's a huge surge of other Black men writing memoir.
Yeah, I mean, it's important because um, I would say, at least in like the last generation, traditionally, and like you'll hear it in conversations in your circle of friends potentially, or you'll see it online and it's promoted in the media, especially like in the African American community, that our women are doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And we can get at another time as a reason why, and how like men like have been targeted with mass incarceration. So obviously we're not going to be present because so many of us are in prison. But even for the ones who haven't been incarcerated, men in our community have to take a look in the mirror and basically tell themselves the truth that we've been playing the background too long. And we've been allowing the ladies in our community to take the forefront. And it's about time that we say, hey, you guys can have a break. You know, we need to go step up to the forefront, and we need to take the brunt of these fights and the punishment that comes along with these fights. So a lot of people can talk and do things, talk about things, but me, it might not seem like it from now because I can talk a lot, but I'm naturally laid back. But I say that to say, even me knowing my personality, I would not be able to look at myself in the mirror if I didn't take these steps forward to put my opinion out there, to make the choices that I make, to to volunteer for elections, and be an election official and being involved in that process, or the groups that I'm affiliated, like in my fraternity, to be an officer in my chapter and things of that nature, to take those leadership roles if I'm talking about it in one vein, but not actually putting any action behind it. So I just think it's important to answer your question that the men in our communities not just talk about it on social media, but actually put action behind those words to make sure that we're doing our job as the men in our community, because it is our job and it is our responsibility.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that because that's a lot to like really marinate on so beautifully. One of the many things that I appreciate about your work and the way you've honored your work is that you've made it so accessible. As one way folks can purchase your work is directly from you. Like
Yes.
this, people don't realize, and I'm saying, and it's interesting, and I hope I'll be able to go at some point, but this is our conversation. I have to preface this is happening during one of the biggest, actually, I think the biggest writing and publishing conference that like ever. It's the AWP weekend happening right now in Kansas City. And I'm not there for a lot of reasons. Which that's a whole I can do a whole Black Writers Read conversation about that. But um the world of like mainstream publishing and distribution can be,
Daunting.
yeah, not only daunting but just not favorable for us. And so just like one of the things that I love is that folks legit can like buy the book directly from you and get it signed. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
So
thmore.com, thmorenovels.com.
yes, thank you. And I'm glad you inserted that. So I'd love for you to share what are some advantages and limitations of self-distribution. And then can you share with us some insight into your publishing journey, since what you do is very different than what the industry is doing.
The best way I can answer that is that I started my first business when I was 11 years old, selling like homemade water ice. My grandmother taught me a recipe and I sold it in my neighborhood. So for 2 summers, I literally was making my own money. And that showed me the value of entrepreneurship. And not just me, like literally, I would say the majority of the people in my family on my mother's side are entrepreneurs or had a business or currently running and operating successful businesses. So I come from a family of people who are used to making our own money. And if jobs weren't made available to us, we just made our own jobs. Um, but as far as publishing is concerned, me using that word daunting is accurate, because once I finished my first book, um, and I'll say rightfully so, because my first book wasn't ready for mainstream. I wasn't a seasoned writer. It was my first work, so I get it. But as I progressed through my books and my writing got better and my promotion got better, I was still getting, the rejection letters from literary agents. I would still get the canned responses. I love your book. No, I'm sorry. I like your book. It's really good, but I'm not in love with it. So for editors, I mean, not editors, for literary agents, if they're not in love with your story, they don't feel confident they can sell it to the standard publishing houses. So I just developed a strategy where I said, once I publish my books, I'll shop it to a literary agent for 3 months. If I get a response, great. If I get a book offer that I think is beneficial for me, great, I'll take it. But if I don't, I'm just going to do it myself. And that kind of ties back into the previous question where we have to not just talk about the things that we want to do, we have or complain about the things that we're not getting. We need to make sure if we see something that we're lacking or see something that we're complaining about, then you just need to do something about it. I could have just not been picked up. I could have not been picked up by an agent and said, "Well, you know what? This is book stuff. This is going to work out for me because no one wants to buy my book." Like, no. If you don't want to buy, if you don't want to publish me, I'll publish me. So I created an LLC in third person publishing. I publish my own books. I finance everything from the editing to the book cover design to the promotion. And the only thing that I don't do myself is actually print the book. So I provide the documents and all the images to Ingram, and they print them how I describe. And those are the books that when they go to thmorenovels.com and they order directly from me for autographed copies, those are the books that I get from my printer and I ship them myself. And but I also, I mean, I'm not fool. I'm gonna upload my book to Amazon because everyone goes to Amazon. But the caveat with that is that with Amazon, for every paperback that I sell, I'm not gonna say might, I know exactly. In royalties, I get $2.55.
That's it?
That's out of the $14.95 that I sell it for, I'll get $2.55. But when you order directly from me from my website, thmorenovels.com, once I subtract what it costs for me to print the book, I clear between $8 to $9 a book. So the good thing about self-publishing and having your own company is that number one, your royalties are better. They're 4 times, it's 400% almost rough math. It's not exact. No, it's like $3, 3 cents. So it's like 300% return that I'm getting compared to selling the same exact book that you can get from Amazon on my website. The downside to it is that the publishing houses, if you do go the traditional way, they have the money. So they got millions of dollars at their disposal. They have editors that's already on payroll. They have all these resources that you can use that you don't have to pay for yourself. But I'm just going to be honest with you. If you think that you getting a regular book deal means you're going to work less, you're lying to yourself. You're still going to have to promote it. You're still going to have to be on the road. You're still going to have to work yourself to death to get the word out there. But you just have a bigger budget than what you have saved in my bank account than what I have within what Simon & Schuster has in their bank account.
Yeah, and thank you for talking about that because that's also too kind of like how my venture got started. Because like back in the mid 2010s, and I started off as a musician, but 2010s I started writing and submitting for publication and just kept getting rejection, and I was like, I can't let the world stop me from releasing my stuff. And someone suggested, they're like, Nicole, you're also a performer. How about you do something different? So that's why I ended up doing the self-produced spoken word album because I was just like, I'm tired of waiting for somebody else to open the door for me. I can open the door myself.
And that's
And
what he needs to do. Like, I get sick and tired of hearing people complain on social media. Well, why don't they give us this award? How come my people aren't nominated? Make your own award show then. Stop relying on America to give you validation. If they're not treating you right, then do it yourself, and then we'll treat ourselves right. And that's my point.
yeah, and then also too, and that's like a whole other conversation
Oh,
in terms of that, like both and in terms of like, getting that recognition. And I'm also like, I can't remember who was that. It was a musician who posted about now, like with the Grammys, they're now going to charge like you have to pay for additional ticket. I'm like, wait a minute,
Really?
what? So it's like it's not even the acknowledgement anymore. And sometimes I wonder if those awards are more popularity contests than actually legitimately awarding talent and brilliance. That's a whole for me. That's a whole other conversation.
The Grammys today, the key word, the buzzword this year was like it's subjective, it's subjective, it's subjective. So I mean, it's and like as America is now, it's turning into a moneymaker. So before it was just like honoring the crafts, recognizing the artists who deserve it. Now, like okay, we're going to charge you, and now we got bottles of champagne at every table. So I mean, like America is good for making money. So now they found out how to monetize the Grammys.
Mm. And the Grammys is a whole. Oh, I stopped watching it decades ago because I was
I just
just like,
did this year for to see if Killer Mike was going to win because I'm a fan.
yeah, I'm so glad he won, but I'm not gonna talk about like what happened after.
Like I'm just like, but I digress.
But again, this is what like honestly, I feel like it needs my show needs to be called Black Writers Read and that because I tend to talk a lot about like culture and society and be like Black Writers Read and um you mentioned in your bio growing up in Camden, New Jersey, then attending an HBCU, and now living in Baltimore. And we talked a little bit about this offline because I grew up in Detroit and he's now in Baltimore, and we almost had the like dream Super Bowl. But again, that's a whole other conversation. These cities and places can offer uniquely affirming experiences for Black folks. How have these spaces affirmed your identity as a Black author, and how have they contributed to shaping and informing your writing?
Like myself, like most writers, like we draw from our personal experiences for like inspiration. Um, and I do that myself. Like my first book, The End Justifies the Means, it takes place in Philadelphia and Camden, New Jersey, because that was the backdrop of the story. Even though the story is about two family members and examines the choices that they make and how those choices affect their lives and takes them in two different directions. But for me, again, I like to draw from my personal experiences. Um, and basically, how I like to describe it is that um, me not, since it's fiction, obviously, I'm not, everything is not the truth, but the spice of my writing fiction is adding, that embellishment or or flat out the untruth to make the story a more appealing or making it a page turner and making it more exciting. So, the my background, my experiences, me traveling, me going to an HBCU, the cities that I grew up, that's the foundation. That's the backdrop of my stories. And then whatever my imagination comes up with to fill in those gaps, that's the seasoning and the extras and the ingredients that I add to the story.
Nice. And before we close out, I want to insert the question. So, Guinevere, she is a major supporter of Black Writers Read. She typically is here for it live, but unfortunately wasn't able to attend. And
Right.
she's read your first two books, and so she wanted me to ask you a question.
Sure.
So she says, I have enjoyed reading I Am and the Unsettling Truth, and I'm halfway through The End Justifies the Means. I wanted to ask Mr. Moore, and what I noticed was a difference in writing styles between the two books. In The End Justifies the Means, let me see if I can get this right. So in I Am, it felt like action and long passages of Sandy and Xavier's dialogue, and then she felt that Sandy and Xavier's actions and passages of dialogue on the courtroom scenes were where she actually gathered some of the motivation. So, what she's getting at here is a particular style choice in terms of using dialogue to really flesh out the characters and understanding their motivations. And it is a different, and she noticed that it's a different style choice from most of your books. So,
Yeah.
she wanted to know, was this something that just happened in the writing process, or this was intentional because of the book's content? I hope the question makes sense.
No, I follow you. It wasn't intentional because of the content. There was a 16-year span between those two books. The End Justifies the Means was my first book that I wrote when I was in England, and now I Am was written 4 years ago. So over that course of 16 years, I mean, just to put it bluntly, my writing got better. Like I touched on it a little bit earlier when I was talking about the End Justifies the Means. It was my first stab at writing. It was the best that I could do with my skill set. But as the years progressed and I was writing more often and I was essentially reading more often, my writing got better and my grasp of the English language and communication became better. Even the way that I speak has even changed. And like my friends, they'll comment on it. It's it was it's basically my writing and my communication and my grasp of English language just matured. That's what it was. And a funny story is that I remember when I finished my first book, The End Justifies the Means, I always give it to like a friend for like their honest opinion. I have a friend named Yasmin. She's who I call my grammar Nazi, because she, like even when we text, she does not let me use, like, if the verb conjugation is off, she's just like, no, you mean such and such. I love her to death for it, but like, you, she is who she is. But I appreciate her for that. But I gave it to her to show her brother, who was also a writer. And I lied to you not. He gave me like one of the most honest and sobering critiques in my life when I was at that, like, 16 years ago. And he's literally said he has very limited vocabulary. And I was pissed off, and I was just like, yo, who the fuck does he think he's talking to? Like the city boy in me like took over. And then, but as I got older, and like there's times where I go and pick up the End Justifies the Means, and I'll flip through a random page and I'll read it, and I was just like, oh wow. So I can even see the difference between my writing from then compared to now. But to answer your question, my writing just matured. That's all.
Oh, nice. And then lastly, I want to close out our conversation with, what is next for you, and how can a Black Writers Read community support you on this journey?
I'll answer the last one first. Go to thmorenovels with an s.com. You'll be able to find all my books. You can order them there. The books you order from thmorenovels.com, they will be autographed and shipped from me. You'll get a personal message from me. The books you get from Amazon.com, they're shipped by Amazon. You will not get an autograph or anything personalized from it. But hey, I know some people, they're creatures of habit. If they like to get it from Amazon, that's fine too. But also on Amazon, you get the Kindle version that I cannot provide you from my website. And you also, if you don't have time to read, you get the audiobook versions. So if you don't have time to read, I'll read them to you. So, it's you get the best of both worlds. Now, if you talk about social media, on Instagram, my handle is the same as my website, More Novels. It's the same on Twitter. Facebook is different. You have to drop the S on and go to More Novel, because Facebook kicked me off of their site about 2 years ago, and I've been on Facebook. I've been in Facebook prison, and they deleted my old account that had like 5,000 maxed out friends and things like that, because they didn't appreciate the content of I Am, because I was talking about killing cops in a fictional sense. So, police, if y'all watching this, I'm not talking about life. I killed the fuck out of y'all in my book though, but they didn't like it, so they kicked me out. So I had to recreate a whole new profile. So that's why my profile now only has like, it's under 1,000 people. But I'm slowly growing that back up. So More Novel on Facebook and More Novels on Instagram and on Twitter.
Mhm.
Oh, the first part of your question.
Yes. What is next for you? Besides,
Oh,
because I think your book Ghetto Bastards coming out in what, July?
all right. So I don't want people to get upset or sad about this announcement. once Ghetto Bastard comes out, that will probably be my last book that I write for a little while. Not ever, but just for a little while. And here's the reason, because I'm at that point where I need to transition one of my stories into a movie. So after Ghetto Bastard has been published and released and promoted, and I sell the hell out of that, there's going to be a sequel to Ghetto Bastard where I just add an S, and it's going to be called Ghetto Bastards. And that's going to be a movie that I'm going to write. And instead of Ghetto Bastard just being about me, Ghetto Bastards will be about my life experience, but include my family in totality.
Oh, wow. I do like that, even though you won't be writing. I like that
Yeah,
your work.
I have something coming for you guys, but luckily I have some friends in my circle who work in the TV and movie production. And we, over the years, have been having conversations where, like, look, I want to make a movie. And I've literally sat them down, like, how much money do I need? And they gave me a number. So for the next, I mean, I've already started, but like, especially for like the next 2 to 3 years, my focus is going to be raising the money so I can create that independent film that will ultimately, hopefully get picked up and made into a television series or a movie that makes it to the silver screen. But by the very least, I'm going to make it myself if I have to, and just release it on a streaming service or it make a film festival.
Yeah, and Black Writers Read, we're here. You and I are now connected. Please keep me in
Oh,
touch. I will. Yeah,
you're gonna,
I'll share it. Oh, what's that?
you're gonna hear all about it. Believe me, you're in my list of contacts.
Yay! And I'll share the information and things like that. And also too, because that was one of the things because I Am was the book that I had a chance to read, and I'm like, I hope, because you write and think, and I think this is where the two protagonists comes from, and how you're working out things in dialogue. You do write in a way that your books can be adapted into film. So I'm glad that that's something that you're thinking about.
Yes, not thinking about it. We're actioning on it. It's gonna happen.
Yes. Yes. So we are at the conclusion of our conversation. TH, it was so great chatting with you today.
Any questions from the audience?
Yeah, no questions came in. We did have a ton of like praise and like, oh my god, this is great. So we had a great audience today who has just been like
Okay.
giving you flowers. So I'm loving it.
Take that. All right. Just wanted to make sure I didn't miss any of their questions if they had any.
Yes. Yep. Because I'm actually moderating and taking. And I just wanted to share a quick comment from Deborah. She's saying, looking forward to
Oh,
reading your newest book.
thank you for joining. I appreciate it. That's my son's not godmother, his grandmother.
Oh, that's so cool. Yay, I love family being here. So I have a couple of things to like wrap up our conversation today. So I'm gonna do like a solo exit. But TH, thank you so much
Thank you.
for for being on this afternoon. So thank you all for joining us for today's episode of Black Writers Read. For those who were here at the beginning, there were a ton of glitches. So I'm going to re-record some things, and then the recording you'll be able to find on YouTube with the appropriateness that's there. So be sure to check out our website at blackwritersread.com for past episodes and information on upcoming guests and events. We'll be back because we actually have something almost every Saturday in Black History Month. Next Saturday, February 17th at 12 p.m. Eastern, we'll be back with Donna Hemans, who will be here to talk about her latest book. Subscribe to my YouTube channel to keep up with episodes of both Black Writers Read and my other projects. Also, be sure to subscribe to the audio podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, as we'll post the audio from each episode a week or two after the live stream. So thanks to all of you for spending your afternoon with us, and more importantly, for ensuring that Black authors continue to matter. Have a great one.